And the main thing here, before I go into anything, is really to take care of yourselves, because what we're going to be talking about is about processing emotions, but also emotional regulation and trauma as well. And I'm not going to go into loads of detail in regards to trauma, but just a little bit of a background in regards to how what trauma is, and how people may have experienced trauma, and what sort of things that they may have gone through. It's not too much detail, but please do take care of yourself. If something does come up for you, we do have some useful numbers here. If you're experiencing distress and feel that you are at risk of harming yourself, please call 999. We've listed Samaritans, Leicestershire Mental Health Crisis Support and Central Access Point. The telephone numbers are there. They are open 24 hours. They are talking services, so you can contact them. And if you do feel distressed and would like some extra support, please contact your GP services. I don't sort of anticipate a lot of triggering, but please do let us know in the chat if you are feeling triggered. Please don't just sit there amidst all these emotions. Please let us know, or just take a little bit of space and then come back to the session if you feel as if it's getting a bit much. But I can't. It's not heavy. It's more information based. But please do take care of yourself. That's the main thing. So let's look at what trauma is. See, trauma can mean different things to different people. But in the context of today's session, we will be talking about adverse childhood experiences. So those would be sort of, what we've experienced as a child, physical abuse, neglect, emotional or psychological abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, bullying. Now people think bullying, there's, we can sort of name many people who might have had bullying, but with all of these, it's not a one-off incident, because people can class trauma as a one, and trauma can be classed as a one-off incident. But what we're talking about here is a drip of adverse experiences, especially as we're children. And when we're growing up, child development, we are developing beliefs based on the messages, non-verbal and verbal, that were coming through. So, it is a sort of amalgamation of everything that that children would go through. That is what we're talking about in regards to what hampers our ability to then be able to process our emotions. So what happens if somebody suffers trauma? So beliefs are created based on the messages that are given to us. Now, those messages, like I said, can be verbal, they can be non-verbal, they can be from our primary caregivers, like our parents, they can be from our teachers, they can be from our peers. This is where bullying is very, very detrimental to emotional health as well, because the messages that children get from their peers when they are not included or they're not accepted is just that I'm not accepted, or I am not seen, or I'm not good enough to be included in this. So belief systems are made from the ages of, say, between 2 and 10. So those primary years are really, really important in regard to child development, where our belief systems are made. So if the messages have been a consistent sort of, it's a compounded message system that our subconscious kind of just latches onto, is probably a very strong statement, but holds on to, or sort of filters in. And we've got core beliefs. Now, there could be different core beliefs. I'm not saying that this is what everyone has, or I'm not saying that this is sort of these are the only ones. There'll be other ones, but from my experience and working with clients who have had adverse child experiences, these are probably the most common ones, where feelings of I'm not good enough, feelings of I am not lovable, feelings of I am not worthy, feelings of I am not seen, I am not accepted. Now, these messages, these core beliefs are created in response to sort of either us feeling rejected, or feeling as if, we are not getting what we need. So we're not getting our emotional needs met. Now, emotional needs are just as important as our physical needs when we're growing up. So this is where a lot, people sort of sometimes really question their childhood experiences, because they think, well, I had all my physical needs met. I was looked after, I was safe, I was giving food, and my mom or my parents looked after me. And I'm not saying that this is a mom thing at all. It's just that our primary caregivers are usually our moms, where we first attach to. So if there is an insecure attachment in there, we are more likely to be able to feel that we might not have been good enough, or might not have been lovable, not have been worthy. But like I said, actually our attachments can be both our parents, like fathers as well, siblings as well. So it's not just mum. But as we're growing up, and especially as we start forming attachments, it is generally to mum, because mum is generally our caregiver, primary caregiver. Now, what happens when we do have these core belief systems? So the way these core belief systems work is that they are created based on the messages that we've given. Now, when they are created, we have feelings, and if for those that have children, or for those that you remember some of these experiences, you would remember that massive feeling, because these feelings are massive, these feelings are really, really big. To a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old, that feeling of not being seen is all consuming, and it's very, very painful. As we get older and we look back, we can rationalize, and we've got our critical faculty in place, so we can reason. But as children, we can't reason. So when we're feeling that rejection to us is the biggest, most painful thing in the world. And for us to stop feeling that, our defense mechanisms are born. And our defense mechanisms are born because our subconscious wants us to protect us from that feeling, because that feeling is almost like, it's the end of the world. It's the most painful thing, and I can't survive this feeling. That's what that feeling is. So when our defenses are born, it generally is to protect us. Now, some of these defenses, and like I said, these are not all the defenses. Some of these defenses can be prioritizing other people's needs. So let's look at that. If you prioritize as a child, if you're feeling rejected or not seen or not lovable, what is the natural tendency? What's the path of least resistance would be to prioritize somebody else's needs, to show them that you love them, just so that then we can elicit that elicit the love back from them. That's prioritizing other people's needs. So that's a very subconscious thing. All of these defenses are subconscious. Don't generally think of this, and they're born within childhood as well. So children don't rationalize, they don't think this has just happened, so, and it's not just that they will go to that one, they'll figure it out. So they'll sort of find the one that gets them those emotional needs met. That's why they're called defense mechanisms. So for example, if a child realizes that actually if I prioritize, if I give more attention to somebody else, then they'll give me attention. I'll be included in there, or I'll be sort of, I'll be seen, or I'll be accepted, or I'll be loved. People see it in, like for example, if you're going to use the school setting, there have been sort of occasions when children will do somebody else or their friends' homework for them. Because if they make themselves useful, if they prioritize somebody else's needs, then they'll be accepted. And by being accepted, it soothes that feeling of I am not acceptable, I am not worthy, I am not worthy of love, I'm not lovable. That pain then it's not that it's no longer there, but it's soothed enough for them to be able to move forward and function. Marie, I think before I carry on, just give me a time check as well, because I do tend to talk a lot. So I think if we get to it's 11 o'clock, if you can just give me a time check at about 11:30, 20 to 12, that's that'll be great.
Yes.
because I do tend to talk a lot. You guys will notice this.
That's all right. I'm here.
So the other thing is making ourselves as small as possible. So this is a safety thing. Now, if you go back to, physical abuse, and a child is not going to be able to stand up to a parent, that's not a safe thing for them. Their brain is not going to say, well, you need to stand up to your parent. What the brain and the subconscious side of it is, make yourself as small as possible so you're not a target. So people make themselves as small as possible. Now, if we bring that forward into relationships, we can think about sort of how people get submissive. That's not a choice. That's not something that people choose to be, but from their experiences as a childhood, the subconscious conditioning is that actually if I am submissive, if I make myself as small as possible, then I'll be safe, or I'll be okay, because I won't be seen as a threat. So I will get either accepted or I'll be ignored, and I can be safe then. Or for somebody who's it could be anything, it could be from relationships, or even parental relationships or sibling relationships. If they make themselves submissive and then prioritize somebody else's needs, then that gives the impression to the other person in that relationship that they are more important, and that might soothe whatever's going on for them. And then they'll be more amenable to be able to have a relationship with the person in question. So it can be very, very intricate, but because it's very subconscious, people don't, this is not something that we deliberately do. This is something that is conditioned into us subconsciously from a very young age. It's not that you choose to be something. Like, for example, getting angry, the belief could be that actually getting angry keeps me safe. And if the belief is that keeping angry gets me safe, you're more likely to get angry when you're defensive, or you're more likely to get to anger quicker than another person, because your belief would be, if I am angry, then I will either be heard, I'll be seen, or I'll be safe. So you can see that the emotional needs underneath that is what's driving the emotions, and it's what's driving the behavior. Now, not accepting help is a very interesting one, because that's born from insecure attachment. So when our primary caregivers have not been there all of the time, so it's not that they've never been there, it's just they've not been there all of the time, all the time that we need. And there's they've done studies on this, and I think it's about 70 to 75% of the time that primary caregivers should be able to respond quite quickly to a child's needs. Not 100%, because that's perfect, and children don't need 100% response time. But I think that when they've done the studies, it's shown that if it falls below 50%, that's when there's an insecure attachment starting to be formed, because the child doesn't know when the emotional needs or the physical needs are going to be met. So it's almost like am I going to be left to cry kind of thing. So when that happens, it goes two ways. The pattern of behavior can either be prioritizing somebody else's needs, like we've talked about, or the child becomes very, very independent and very self-sufficient and not relying on somebody else. Now, if you look at on the outside and you can think, oh, well, that person's really independent, they don't accept help, they don't need anything, they're like a unit in themselves. But why are they a unit in themselves? Because they can't trust somebody else to be there for them because of their experience. So that defense is still a defense. And sometimes we look for external validation. So when we don't trust ourselves, we've not learned to trust ourselves because of our conditioning, because of the messages that we've been given, when we've not learned to look at ourselves and really value ourselves, we look at external validation. So we look for praise, or we look for love, or we look for acceptance outside of ourselves, because we've never been taught that we are good enough. So we've never had those messages to believe that we are good enough and that we can trust ourselves. So for example, if somebody's got a secure attachment where they've they've had their needs, emotional needs met most of the time. You know, they've the primary caregivers had been there and sort of they've had positive experiences more than negative. It's not all positive, but more than negative experiences, or positive messages more than negative messages. That person then, the way the secure attachment works is that that person develops the confidence to be able to, that child develops the confidence to be able to move forward, knowing that they can always go back to the secure attachment, which is the primary caregiver, and that secure attachment is always going to be there. So trust. So, you know, if I go away and play and come back, I'm going to use mum as an example. My mum's going to be there. Or if I go out and do this, you know, I'm always going to be, someone's always going to be there. I'm always going to be there. I'm always going to be loved. I am valued. I am safe. Now, as they grow older into teenage years, that secure attachment then becomes internalized within themselves. So then that then sets the tone almost, and sets the foundation of their self-worth and self-value. So we don't look for external validation, because we can recognize our value and our trust in ourselves. But more often than not, we do come across a lot of people who have an insecure attachment, varying degrees of it. So they do, so the defense then kicks in and sort of starts looking for external validation. But the concept behind all of these defenses, because the defense mechanisms, is safety. We need to feel safe. Safe enough either in our skin, safe enough in relationships, safe enough in anything, in our jobs, in our family environment, physical and emotional safety. Right, emotional regulation. Now, emotional regulation is a key part of our childhood development. So when children are too busy keeping safe, so when the defense mechanisms start, what happens is the emotional regulation does not become a priority. So emotional regulation is that freedom to be able to express our emotions without punishment or judgment, be able to know that ourselves and our emotions are accepted. So, for example, we can have, we've worked with so many clients where they weren't allowed to feel angry. They weren't allowed. And anger is a big one, and it's probably a more obvious one to use as an example, because there's so many different messages when it comes to anger. I mean, the feedback that we've had in regards to how what has been said to people, well, anger, it has been called an ugly emotion, or girls don't get angry, or don't get angry at me, or don't shout at me, you know. But if you think about it, just take a step back and think about what's happening in that scenario. That child is not happy, and that child is trying to express themselves, and when they get shut down then and are told that that's not an appropriate way to behave, or that's not an appropriate emotion to show, then they shut that emotion down. So that hampers the emotional regulation. You know, they don't, because they are not able to process that emotion down to the end of it, like right through to the end. It stops right at the beginning, and they don't know, they can't really emotionally regulate themselves because they're not allowed to show. So if you're not allowed to show your emotion, if you're not even allowed to feel the emotion, you know, then how are you going to be able to learn to regulate your emotions when, you know, the messages around you is that, why are you crying for that? That's not a reason to cry. Why are you angry? That's not a reason to be angry about. You know, oh, you know, why don't go and have a timeout? You know, because you're not, because you and your emotions are not acceptable. That's the non-verbal message there. So when children have received that non-verbal message, the emotional regulation stops. So they learn to suppress emotions. They shut them down before they even start, because, you know, I'm not allowed to feel that, so I'm going to have to just do it. Or something's wrong with me, that's why I'm not allowed to show it. So that's called emotional dysregulation, and it affects us, like what I've got on the screen, that we're not unable to identify or express our emotions. So we don't know. So how do we know? As a 4-year-old, you're not going to know. what anger is unless somebody labels it for you. You're not going to know what sadness is until somebody labels it for you. But if nobody's labeling it for you, then how are you going to learn? So we grow up unable to identify emotions or express emotions. So we suppress our emotions until they become too much to contain. Now, this is where people think, oh, well, there's something wrong with me here because I just explode. No, you don't explode. If you just take a step back and look at what's happened is that you've got emotions building up for a period of time or even years, and then you have a moment where you actually, when things explode and things come out which you've been trying to contain. And emotions do come out when they're not made to just be sort of suppressed in our bodies. We are supposed to be able to express them. We are supposed to be able to process them for our own health, physical health as well as mental health. Emotional dysregulation also is that we're ashamed of our emotions. So the messages that we receive is that it's not acceptable. So it makes us ashamed of feeling angry, or it makes us ashamed of being hurt, or it makes us ashamed of crying as well. So then what do? We invalidate our emotions. We feel that we are too much or too sensitive. Maybe we've been told that we've been overreacting, and these are not just, non-verbal messages. These can be verbal messages that can be given to us by our friends, by our siblings, by our families, by our partners. Oh, you're just too much, or you're just too sensitive. But that's in essence is invalidating your feeling, or anything that you're feeling, and that's not fair. That's not. The messages that you received as a child has been very much of invalidation. So why are you feeling like that? You shouldn't be feeling like that. It's what's happened doesn't deserve or doesn't warrant that kind of reaction. And then as we grow up, that's compounded by friends, partners, family members. Oh, you're just too sensitive. You've always been too sensitive. And that's not a very good feeling, because that makes us feel ashamed of it. And that makes us feel as if there's something wrong with us. And that's not true. So let's look at what are emotions. Now, people have different explanations, different descriptions, but emotions are an indication of something happening. So it's your response to something, and it can be good as well. And I mean, a lot of this is based on around what we would call, I hate the word label negative emotions, because there's no such thing as negative emotions, but more painful emotions, anger, guilt, shame. But if you think about emotions as a whole, it gives you an indication of what's going on around you, how that makes you feel. That's what emotion is. If you're feeling happy about something, that's your response. That's giving you an indication of where you are in it. If you're feeling angry about something, that's giving you a response. So that's telling you something, that something is happening around you that you're not okay with. Or guilt, that something's happened that you feel or you think that you've done something wrong, and that's the guilt. Fear, you feeling unsafe, something's happening around you that's making you feel unsafe. So they're almost like our indicators, like a warning system. And when we start suppressing that warning system, that's when we put ourselves in more danger, because in essence we're ignoring things until they reach something like, for example, a panic attack. So if you look at a panic attack, the people that I've worked with can know probably 3 days before that panic attack happens and they've started feeling anxious about something. What they've done is they've distracted themselves and they've suppressed it. Oh, it's just anxiety, or it's going to go away, rather than stepping back and thinking, what's happening here in this situation that's making me feel like this? So what they're doing, or what they were doing, was they're shutting their warning system down, but the body and the mind was still feeling unsafe. So if your subconscious still feels unsafe, it's going to ramp up the warning system. until it gets to a point where you cannot ignore it. It gets to a point where you are experiencing a panic attack. You're not going to ignore a panic attack. But if we've broken it down with clients, and they can generally know when it starts escalating. And it's the same with anything. If you look at your emotions, especially the ones that are a warning to you that, you know, something is happening around you that you're not okay with, they increase. So can we feel them coming up, or do they come up in a rush and overwhelm us suddenly? If you can get, and this will take practice, it's not something that you'll just be able to switch on. It's not like a switch or something. But if you can really get to start knowing you, get into tune in with yourself, you are going to, and be honest with yourself about what's coming up. And by honest, I mean really accept that actually your emotions are okay. You're okay, and you are allowed to feel these emotions, and really have a look at those emotions. You will be able to feel them coming up. People only say that they come up in a rush is because what they've done in the past, and the defense is to suppress them. So then when it reaches that point, it will just come out in a rush and just overwhelm us quite suddenly. But if you practice getting in tune with what is going on inside of you, then you will be able to feel it coming on slowly. And by that, and by it coming on and recognizing that you are able to, for it to come on slowly, you can stop it. You can do something, and we're going to go through sort of what you can do to control that. But you can control it. It's when it comes very, very suddenly, and you've suppressed it and you've ignored it. That's when it's harder to do, because it's very overwhelming. But if you can get practicing in noticing your emotions, you are able to stop that momentum. So like I said, can they be seen as indicators of what is happening around us, or even to us at a moment of time? It's a very good indication of what's happening in the situations. And you know, it's not big situations either. It's situations, it may be conversations. And what it gives you, if you're in tune with your emotions and you're accepting of everything that's happening and inside of you, it gives you a very good indication in, I don't know, conversations, or both professional and personal. We're not talking about big, massive safety problems or risk assessments here. We're talking about just conversations as well. That actually, why did that make me feel not good enough? Why did I feel as if I had to justify myself? You know, and it will, and the more used to you get sort of looking and clarifying things for yourself, the more you'll see a pattern coming, and the more you'll be able to check yourself. So it's more about becoming more self-aware. So look, there's a lot of emotions here. Many people it won't come naturally to you that, oh, I'm feeling inferior or insignificant or excluded or persecuted or nervous or weak or rejected, but they are there. And the more practice you get at sort of identifying what is going on for you. So if something's happened that makes you feel anxious, are you worried about something? Are you scared about something? You know, how are you feeling? Are you feeling helpless? Are you feeling rejected? What does that mean? Are you feeling that you're persecuted, or are you feeling excluded? There's some good ones as well. There's nice, happy ones, you know. But I think as humans, because it comes from our defense mechanisms, we generally don't, I've never really seen any. I think in my experience, I've only had one client that has gone to the joy and happy part. When I've put this in front of them, everyone else tends to look at all of the other side of the feeling wheel. But you know, it's nice to actually acknowledge these feelings as well, because it's not all doom and gloom. You know, there'll be times when you are really joyful, or you are feeling successful, and you are feeling confident and respected and valued, and concentrating on that, and really even fine-tuning what's made you feel respected, what's happened in the situation that makes you feel respected, will give you more self-awareness of what you need to feel respected. You know, so it is all about sort of becoming more self-aware and clarification in regards to your processes. It's very, very personal to you. You know, I mean, anger is a big one. You know, you've got feeling let down, which can lead to feeling betrayed or resentful, you know, humiliated, am I being disrespected or ridiculed? So, you know, I mean, there are many, many more. You don't have to use these, but it's a very good indication of sort of really fine-tuning. It helps you fine-tune what it is. So, you know, when you start off with, I'm just angry. Okay, well, let's look at it. Why are you angry? What's happening? What's happened? Has somebody overstepped your boundary? If somebody's overstepped your boundary, what has that sort of how has that made you feel? Bitter? You know, if you're feeling bitter, then is that because you feel violated? You know, that they've just disrespected? You know, or do you feel frustrated? So what is the frustration? You know, is it annoyance that that person is yet again not listening to you? Or actually, is it now we're going to infuriate it because you've asked them so many times and they're still ignoring you? You know, so rather than looking at just the anger, but really fine-tuning it will allow you to be able to know what boundaries have been crossed. How has it made you feel angry? You know, sad. Are you feeling lonely? What does that mean? Does lonely mean that I'm isolated? Does lonely mean I'm abandoned? You know, it's not easy. And they are very difficult emotions. You know, you do need strength and courage to be able to look at it. But if you are able to sort of cultivate that, and it'll take time. It's not that you're going to just go in there and think, oh, okay, I'm going to be able to just do this and not have your defenses kick in. That's not going to happen. You are going to have defenses kick in. Everyone has defense mechanisms. Somebody tells you I don't have any, I won't believe them. Everyone has them. It's about becoming aware of your defense mechanisms so they don't rule you. You know, so that actually when you are alone somewhere, that you don't feel lonely, because you know at the back of your mind that actually I have a tendency to feel lonely, and that's because I feel abandoned. But that's not what's happening here. I'm not being abandoned by my friends or family. They are doing their own thing, and what I'm going to do is I'm aware of this feeling, but I'm just going to carry on and do what I want to do, because it gives you more control and more power, rather than feeling as if actually I feel abandoned and really, really sad. And then you may react in a certain way where it might not be beneficial, is a strong word, but it might not be beneficial to you emotionally, you know, because it might not get you the response that you need anyway. It might not get your emotional needs met, because underneath all of this is us wanting our emotional needs met. And if you can identify what emotional needs drive us, you are then able to have more control and feel more powerful in your life. Okay, we will come back to this at the discussion bit. So, like, how many feelings from the feeling wheel can you guys recognize? But I think the main thing here is that, can you recognize when they come up for you? So maybe when something happens that makes you feel emotionally or physically threatened, because remember, emotional needs, we need to feel safe. Maybe when somebody oversteps a boundary, but are we then aware of our own boundaries? And boundaries doesn't mean barriers. Boundaries does not mean that we're setting something down in stone and you will not cross that. That's not something that I'm saying here, and that's not something that we really encourage either. You know, I work with many clients, and it's not something that can work, you know. And if you don't think that's going to work, you're not going to want to do it. Boundaries need to be put where it's comfortable for you, where you feel as if actually I'm okay to say no, or I'm okay to say or accept this to this point, but actually anything beyond that, that's making me feel uncomfortable. But it's about being aware of how uncomfortable you feel and accepting that that makes you uncomfortable, rather than thinking, oh, that's making me feel uncomfortable, but because they need me, I'm just going to go and do this anyway. Because many people put themselves out by doing things for their family and friends, especially family and friends, that they don't generally want to do, or they don't have the time to do. But because they don't like to upset them and they don't like to say no to them, they compromise their own boundaries. But what happens when they compromise their own boundaries is you internalize that feeling of frustration and resentment, which is a natural feeling. Resentment is a natural feeling, but we are not conditioned to feel that resentment as a natural feeling. We've been told very from conditioned from a very young age that, you know, you should always be there for everyone else and have no feelings for yourself. But we're only told that by people who want us to be there, who that it works for, you know. But what we're doing here is really looking at what works for you and being able to comfortably put stuff in place that you're okay with. Because if you're not okay with it, you're not going to do it. And if you're not going to do it, you've got a lot of emotions that are going to be coming up for you that you're not going to want to even address, because those emotions are an indication that things are not okay. And it's just a cycle. See, what I've said is, can boundaries sometimes be seen as barriers? But when that happens, are you able to tune into emotions and recognize what you're feeling and accept it? That's the main thing here. Accept what you're feeling. Accept that you're feeling resentful. That doesn't make you a bad person. It just means that you put yourself a little bit more out there than what you're comfortable with. So what happens to our body when we are emotionally threatened? Now, people have, I don't know if you guys are aware of the flight or fright response to trauma, where our body immediately goes into either a fight or flight. But what sometimes people don't know is that there's a freeze mode in there. And that I'm not going to go into a lot in regards to sort of physical sensations and stuff. The only reason that I mention this is that these are triggers. So when we are emotionally threatened, but also physically threatened, our body and mind will react in the way that it feels safest. You're not going to get a choice in it. It's a nanosecond decision. It will just shut down. So if your body thinks, you know, that if your brain thinks that actually in this situation, I'm going to freeze, you know, and people do this. People say, oh, and, you know, it's in conversations and just say, oh, I was frozen to the spot. I didn't know what to say. That's because you've felt either consciously or unconsciously threatened enough for your mind to go blank. And that's what it is. So when that happens, I mean, you can't, in the middle of it, there's not really a lot that we can do unless you know that it's coming. But it's really worth looking at it in hindsight as well and think, okay, that happened, my mind shut down, I was frozen to the spot. What was going on for me? Why did I feel so threatened? Was it threatened? Was it a emotion that I was feeling right then, or did it remind me of something? Because sometimes our triggers and our defenses are from a very young age. So what can we do to change this? So like I said, in the middle of it, if you can't catch it, or if you're unable to catch it at the stage where it's developing or it's just starting, then looking back is a really good learning and self-awareness ability, and it's really beneficial. You know, I don't think we ever stop learning anyway about ourselves. So you're never going to reach a point, I don't think anyway, personally, that, you know, and I can say this for myself, I don't think I'm ever going to reach a point where I think, oh well, I know everything about me. That's for me, that's just not going to happen. So you're constantly learning about yourself. So you're constantly learning about sort of what your thoughts were, what your feelings were, why did I respond in that way. That's what's interesting. So what can we do to change this? So what's meant by processing emotions? How can processing emotions help us in our day-to-day life? So what does it give us? Processing emotions is when you are able to look at the emotion, like we've been talking about, identify what's going on for you, and then be able to sit and feel with it right to the end of what have you learned from it. That's a processing emotion. You know, it's about allowing yourself to feel. So people think, oh, processing emotion might be that I can give myself time to cry. Yes, give yourself time to cry. Give yourself time to be angry. It doesn't mean that you have to vent and rant at the other person. But what it does mean is you are allowing yourself and honoring that feeling. So you're giving yourself that space to be able to feel that, you know, and feel as if, okay, you know, this was not right and I'm not happy with it. but it doesn't have to stop at the release of emotions. Processing means that actually, what happened, what made me feel like that, why did I respond in that way? So what does it give us? I think, and this is just me, but I think it gives us empowerment and control, because if you're able to process your emotions, if you're able to identify what's going on in a situation that makes you feel threatened, then you're not going to put yourself in a situation like that again. It gives you control, it gives you power, it gives you self-awareness, and that's what we need as humans. We need to feel that we're in control. We need to feel that we are empowered, that we have the power to be able to live the lives the way we want to. It feels really scary when we feel that we are not in control of our lives. That's a very scary place to be, and that brings up a lot of anxiety and fear and emotion. So that's what processing emotion gives us, because it gives you that clarity. So how do people generally process emotions? Okay, so generally we're looking at crying. What else do people do to process emotions? Because I'm not talking psychotherapeutically, because I'll give you how to process emotions, but generally people either get very, very angry and start shouting, and that's why they think that they're processing anger. They get or even if they're processing anger, and if they're not allowed to shout and rant, they'll start crying. I know many people, personally and professionally, that I've worked with, that go to tears instead of anger, because they've been told that, or the messages that have been, that anger is not a acceptable emotion, but tears are. So when they get angry, they start crying. That's how they process that. So people have different ways of processing. I mean, sometimes people have a way of working out, or they'll go out for a walk, or they'll go and do something, or they'll talk. Talking is a really good thing, where they will find someone that they trust, and they'll be able to talk it through with that person. But what happens if we can't process emotions? So what if we don't have that? So we can't cry, or so we're not allowed to rant, we're not allowed to be angry or show anger, but we're unable to cry because that wasn't an option for us as we were growing up as well. We don't have any support around us. So, or we don't feel as if we can trust anyone in this moment in time to be able to talk to them in a open, confidential way. So what else do? We project onto others. Now, this is a very subconscious thing. And when I say project onto others, it's about our own feelings about a situation or about ourselves that we think somebody else is thinking. So, if we don't feel great about ourselves, I'm just going to use something really shallow. It's not really, really shallow. But if you think that you don't look great in something that you're wearing, and you've come downstairs, and I'm going to use a partner. So your partner looks at you, and you're just going to, and the question is, do I look fat in this? Now the thing is that if you think you look fat in that, whatever he or she says, it's really not going to make that much of a difference, because you've already decided in your mind that you look fat. So then if he or she doesn't say anything, you're going to interpret that as, oh my God, yes, I do. If he says no, you're still going to interpret that as, I think you're lying, because you're projecting. Now, so it's not about them, it's about you. So when you feel as if somebody doesn't like you, or you've done something, that you're not comfortable with, you're going to think that everyone is being quite judgmental. But they might not even know. For them, we're very separate. So it's very separate. So we keep them to the side. It's all about us. If we're not comfortable, if we don't feel good enough in ourselves, then we will feel not good enough for others. If we feel that we're not loved in ourselves, we will feel that we're not loved. So nothing that the other person or our family members or anything can do will be able to fill that emotional need. But this is linking back to the defenses we spoke about. All of our patterns and behaviors are to elicit that from us. So another thing that we can't, when we can't process emotions, is suppress them or distract ourselves. Like I talked about, if you distract yourself enough, it will gather momentum until it reaches a point where you're not going to be able to ignore it. See, this is another interesting one. Pick up on other people's projections. Now, this is not that you're projecting onto them, but you're so sensitive in the sort of, because your defenses are hypervigilant, you know, so you've grown up really tuning yourself into reading other people's faces, tones, you know, body language, right? So you'll pick up when they're not happy, but you'll internalize that. Oh, there must be something that I've done. Well, actually, no, there's nothing that you've done. That's all about them. So the way they're acting is a reflection of them. But because we don't know how to process our emotions and we internalize it, we think it's about us. So again, it's become more internal to us. So I know that's different to projecting onto others, and they are two different things, and people do tend to do both. You know, so you either project or you pick up on something that some people are doing, but then make it as if it must have been my fault, I've done something, you know. And then what we try and do is we try and appease that situation or fix it somehow, because, you know, it'll make it more comfortable for us. But actually, if you were in tune with your own emotions, you'd be able to link it back to assessing the situation. What have I done here? And logically, you'll be able to see that actually I've not done anything. This is not about me. This is about him or her, or my siblings, or my friends. You know, I've not done anything. I've conducted myself absolutely fine. I'm okay and happy with the way I've reacted to the situation, or not even reacted. I'm perfectly happy in the way I have been. This is not about me. But that's when you can assess the situation and clarify, because you're owning your own emotions. We develop physical symptoms when we can't process emotions. People have reported IBS, people have reported migraines, people have reported you know, eczema as well sometimes. You know, there are lots and lots of different physical symptoms that you can get, aches and pains, you know, that can be, because there have been so many times when, you know, people have gone, or clients have gone to the doctors, and doctors can't physically find anything wrong with them, but the physical symptoms are there, and it's because they have been unable to process their emotions. So there is a link to unable to process emotions and physical symptoms, you know, and it's really good to emphasize that, because if we can recognize that something is happening, so if you can recognize that I'm getting migraines, I'm getting a headache, then you know that something needs to be done emotionally. You need to do some check-in with you. You need to do a check-in, emotional check-in, to say what is going on here. You know, am I too stressed out? It might just be that actually you're just really, really stressed out and you're too busy. You know, but what do we need to do then to make sure that that doesn't happen? So it's about regulation. It's about you getting to know yourself and know what your foundation, get your and regulate to that, like, homeostasis point. People think it's anxiety as well. Anxiety is like a warning system, you know. But if you think it's anxiety and you don't do anything about it, if you think, oh, I've always had anxiety, I've always had this horrible feeling in my stomach, or, you know, I always get like this when this happens, without assessing, without clarifying what is going on for me here, because you've always had it, you've always been told that you've had it, or you've been said, oh, actually this is just anxiety, you know, here you go, you know, you can take this for it, or, you know. And sometimes when we get things, and I'm not saying anything about medication, because there is a place for it, you know. But if we just rely on that and not really do an emotional check-in as to why it is that's making us feel like this, what happens is that we then think that whatever is happening around us is just anxiety, and we'll just put it down to that, and that's it. But then it gets worse because you're distracting yourself, or you're not really looking at yourself, you're not really assessing the situation, you're not really thinking about what is it that's making you feel unsafe. Anxiety is fear-based. If you're feeling anxious, and if it is anxiety rather than an anger or sadness or grief or loss or rejection is a big one. If it's not one of those things and it is anxiety, anxiety is fear. Why am I feeling anxious? Is it anxiety about the future? Is it anxiety about my situation right now? Am I scared of something? It's a really good check-in point.
Shabnum is 35 past, just to let you know.
Okay, no, that's good. I think that we're nearly at the end. Thank you, Marie. Okay, so strategies to process emotions. You know, we've covered a lot of this, acceptance of ourselves and accepting the way we feel. And when we do that, it enables us to reflect, question, and think about what has come up for us. And that is the key thing, that to reflect, question, and think about what's come up for us. Because if we're too scared to think about what's coming up for us, then we're going to be stuck in that circle of not being able to process our emotions. But in order for us to reflect and question, we do need to feel safe, and timing is important. We need to feel safe, not only in our environment, but ourselves. So it's not going to be a safe thing. So if you're having a massive row at work, you know, you'll need to be able to find the time and place to be able to just reflect about what's happened. You know, you're taking yourself away and just looking at what's happened here. Or if you're feeling really, really unsafe in a situation, then taking yourself just away and being able to think, okay, what is it? Because it's not about immediate response. We're not talking about reacting here. We're talking about really looking at what it is that's making you feel. And safety, if you don't feel safe, you're not going to be able to look deeper. That's the key. You need to be able to feel safe, and that could be with somebody else. You can talk to somebody else. You know, this is what we do at Quetzal. We do counselling. You know, we've got clients who are unable to feel safe in themselves. So we provide a safe therapeutic space to be able to sit there with them so they can then look deeper. Resilience. So we ask ourselves, do we feel strong enough to take ownership of our emotions? You know, or are we looking to external people or agencies to take care of us? Now, there's a difference, because I'm not saying do not ask for external help. So needing an external source to take care of you is different to asking for help. So, you know, asking for help and having counselling support is different from asking somebody to be able to do something for you. We can't do that. And there's nobody else that will be able to do it for you. You know, you've heard that phrase, I think it's Rumi's quote, that says, you know, I can walk next to you in this journey, but I can't walk this journey for you. You know, and none of us can. But we have to sort of dig deep and find the courage to be able to do that. And, you know, it's not going to just come up straight away, depending on your, you know, childhood experiences. But it's about recognizing, do I need help here? And then thinking, okay, if I need help to be able to do this, because this is important for me to be able to feel more in control, feel more empowered, feel able to be more in control of my emotions, you know, feel that rather than feeling overwhelmed and they are in control of me, that I can then be in control of them. That will give you, that's resilience, that's going to give you that power to be able to seek help. Giving ourselves the space and time to work through feelings and understand why it's affected us in this way. And feeling supported. So do you have a supportive network of family and friends that you can turn to? And that is important, to be able to feel that you can turn to somebody and be able to be open with them. You know, even if it's one person, you know, there is an element of having that supportive network around you. It doesn't have to be masses of people. Even if you've got that one person that you know that you will be able to just contact and be able to say, oh my God, this is what's happened today. Can you believe it? and then be able to work through why it's affected you the way it's affected you. So if you think what's coming up for you in a situation, so you're in a situation, something's coming up for you, are you able to recognize what's coming up for you? You know, is it anger? It could just be those general ones before you tune in and really become very, very self-aware and be able to find out, oh, this is what's happening. There's so many emotions on there, you know, that I won't even be able to name half of them, to be honest. But if you can say, okay, I'm feeling anger or frustration, you know, does it need to be labeled? If it's anger, is it frustrated? Am I feeling frustrated? Am I being bitter? Is it resentful? Because that will help you assess the situation. But rather than react in that way, in anger or in bitterness, or say something that you may later regret, or you may not, but maybe you might do, you can step back physically or even mentally and just pause before reacting. You don't have to react. You don't have to say anything straight away. You know, give yourself the time to be able to just sit with it. Even for it's 10 seconds is a massive time. You know, when you're counting, just breathe and just just stop and just breathe and think, okay, I don't have to respond. I don't have to react in this way, because you don't have to. You can decide how you want to respond, because, you know, if you give yourself enough time, and messages are even better, because you can just either just put the phone away, put the phone down, and just be able to just say, where is it come from? Is it coming from now? Is it that this person has overstepped a boundary and I'm not happy with it, I'm not uncomfortable with it? Or is it coming from back when I felt rejected? You know, and I'm not saying, and I'm not going, you know, sort of inferring that you're going to know immediately. You might not know, you know, but what does it feel like? Does it feel like rejection? Does it feel like somebody's ignoring you? What does that mean? Does it mean abandonment? Does it mean rejection? You know, and then you decide how you want to respond, because a response and a reaction are two very different things. A reaction is very much out of control and it may make you feel a certain way, and a response is very measured, but that gives you the element of control. And this is a good question and I do think this is a really important question, and this is something that I ask myself. So, you know, it may not resonate with you, and that's absolutely fine if it doesn't, but I really ask myself how I feel, or what's more important, how I feel or the need to get my point across. And the reason why I ask that is, from all of my experience and years as a clinical lead and a psychotherapist, I know that people are not going to hear you if they can't process it. So we've got, you know, there's been so many occasions where, you know, clients have said, well, I just wanted him to understand. I wanted her to understand. I just needed them to hear this. But what if that person, because everyone hears and listens and sees subjectively through their own processes, you know, they're not going to be able to get your point, especially if the emotions are heightened in that moment. They're only going to see through their own subjective eyes. They're only going to see through their own subjective processes. So what's more important? Is it that I know I'm going to persevere, I have to get you to understand it no matter how bad it's making me feel? Or you just take a step back and think, okay, you're not hearing me, you're not going to hear me, you're not going to see me right now, it's fine. I'm just going to take care of myself and my feelings and my emotions. And that brings me to self-care, because that is a massive point of self-care. You know, when you get to that point and you think, my need to make myself feel better because I need to soothe myself now is more important than getting my point across to you, or making you see my point, or making you understand where I'm coming from. That's you choosing self-care. And let's look at the other types of self-care. So you've got physical, sleeping, stretching, walking, exercising, nutrition, yoga, you know, they're all sort of standard ones. Emotional, stress management, coping skills, compassion, therapy. Journaling is a good one. Compassion and journaling, you know, because we don't, depending on our childhood experiences, and even if you've had, you know, many positive ones, many people don't look at themselves with compassion. Many people think, oh, okay, you know, I need to do better, or I need to do it this way. And they sort of give themselves a talking down to, or telling off in their head that, oh, you should have done this better, or keep going, or, you know, why are you doing it like this? And actually, I think you can still get the messages across, but if you turn those critical voices, I know there's different degrees of criticism in there, you know, but if you change it to a more nurturing voice and saying, it's okay, you know, you don't have to do it like that, but it's fine, nothing serious has happened here, you'll be all right, we'll be able to recover from this, is more soothing than, you know, telling yourself off and saying, well, you shouldn't have done it like that. And so compassion to self is really, really massive, because if you're compassionate to yourself, your boundaries are going to be already be there in place anyway, because you're not going to allow anybody else to treat you unkindly, because you don't treat yourself unkindly. So it's not about getting your views out there, or getting, you know, or telling people you need to treat me like this. No, you just don't. If you're treating yourself kindly, you just won't put yourself in those positions where people are, or when people do, because you can't control what people do, you can only control what you do. It's easier to then either have the boundaries in place, or say that I don't think that was necessary, or I think that was quite unkind actually, and I don't think I deserve that. But you don't do it from a point of reaction, you do it as a response, because you think kindly of yourself anyway. So you're not needing the other person to meet that emotional need, you're just stating a fact that that wasn't necessary. So and the boundaries come into the social part. Support system is self-care. Social media is very, very it's very dangerous, depending on who you follow and what you follow. But if you're going to do social media, you know, there's lots of lovely pages that you can follow in regards to just reaffirming that positivity and that compassion to yourself. And if you're going to use that as a type of self-care, then please do make sure that you've got a positive influx that's coming through your news feeds. Communication is a self-care. Like we were talking about, you don't have to talk about everything in regards to this is how you need to treat me, this is what I want, this is what my goals are, but actually communicating in an authentic way when they have when you feel disappointed, or when you feel angry, because you're allowed to feel angry, you're allowed to feel disappointed, you're allowed to feel sad, and you are allowed to say it. And when you respond rather than react, it's heard better from the other person, because your reaction may trigger a defense, but your response, where you're stating how you're feeling, that I'm not happy, you know, this actually has really, really annoyed me because of this reason, and you're doing it in a more responded, sort of measured way, that's not going to trigger any of their defense. And if they still don't like it, that's a reflection of what's happening for them rather than what's happening with you. Spiritual, time alone, meditation, prayer, nature, sacred space. Give yourself time. It doesn't matter. This is not something, and there'll be other stuff that you can put in there. This is not the be all end of self-care, but really have a look at these, like the hobbies, the goals, identity, authenticity. Authenticity is to yourself. If you're true to yourself, if you are able to recognize and accept you for everything that is in you, including your flaws. You know, nobody is perfect, but actually nobody has flaws. People have defenses, people have things, behaviors that they don't maybe like, or patterns of behaviors that have been developed that they've not been conscious of. You know, but if you accept all of them and think, you know, that's me, that's the way I react at the moment, but the more you become self-aware, the more you'll be able to control and respond in that way. And that does bring us to the end. Now, again, I want to just remind you of our telephone numbers in case something has come up for you.